my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and it is Thursday, so it means it's time for our Thursday Trends episode. Hope everybody out there is doing well. Thank you for asking. I am currently on my deathbed right now. I feel like complete and utter shit. Maybe you can hear it in my voice. I have been dealing with a nasty, nasty cold all week long. It feels like a borderline flu. I don't know what the hell is going on, where I got this from, but it kicked my ass the last 2 to 3 days. And even right now, I'm like on the other side of it, but I feel like somebody's sitting on my chest and like it hurts to talk. So I'm glad I came here to do a podcast for an hour. But I felt bad, like I didn't do an episode on Thursday or Tuesday, whatever fucking day it is, on Tuesday, and I apologize for that. I was really bad on Tuesday. And then everything that has happened in the news cycle, and it's elections on, next Tuesday. So it's just felt like I had to hop on here and push through. I probably sound like complete ass right now. I apologize. We're gonna thug it out together and hope for the best on today's episode. So you've been warned. My throat is already killing me after just 2 minutes of talking. Anyway, let's talk. I mean, what we're going to talk about, obviously, the joke heard around the world. We'll talk about the joke made at the expense of the island of Puerto Rico. That, it's kind of gross of a joke. Talking about Puerto Rico being a floating island of garbage. So we'll talk a bit about that. And then we'll also just talk about, this is like a shitstorm that has happened the last week after this. Because then you had President Biden seemingly calling Trump supporters garbage. Then you had Bad Bunny unofficially endorsing Vice President Harris for the presidency. And she released her plan, coincidentally, for the island of Puerto Rico. It's just been... Oh, and then Donald Trump has been driving around in a garbage truck with his logo on it. It's been a week, guys. It's the last week before the election. I told you this last week's episode. I was over this shit, and I am completely done with it right now. But we'll talk about it. So let's just do it. Let's just get into it. And we'll talk about it in our For the People in the Back segment.
Say it louder for the people in the
We'll start with the joke. I mean, there was a Trump rally at Madison Square Garden in New York City this last week. He had a slew of speakers who were just fucking idiots. Listen, I'm trying to be fair and non-biased here, but these were just people spewing all types of nonsense and bullshit and hate on so many different levels beyond this guy, this comedian. But basically, the person everybody's talking about, the conversation everybody's talking about, is comedian Tony Hinchcliffe. Some people might know him as Kill Tony. He is a pretty popular, podcaster and comedian. He's a part of kind of the Joe Rogan circle, if you will. He was one of the standout people from the roast of Tom Brady. And to be completely honest, I actually, from afar, I never really got, watched his show or listened to his podcast or anything like that. But his story was interesting to me because he's one of these guys who the industry kind of closed the door on him. And he kind of took things into his own hands and created this Kill Tony show that, if I'm not mistaken, it's one of the most popular live shows like that Live Nation, puts on or whatever. Like, it sells out constantly. It's a comedy show that they do in front of a live audience. And I was impressed by that, right? I think for me, I'm always impressed by anybody who finds like the back door into the industry, because I feel like that's very reflective of my journey, right? So I always am interested in appreciate and respect the grind of a lot of these guys, particularly in comedy, who have, sort of created their own space for themselves, even though the industry kind of never really wanted them to be a part of it. And he was one of those guys. But man, talk about a poorly, I don't know, a poor decision, a terrible joke in general. So he was doing this whole set, and he threw jabs at a few people. He had some jokes about black people, and just in general, optically, this man is up speaking at a rally for a potential presidential candidate, one of the two major parties, a person who very well could be the next president. Had this person, a roast comedian, come up and be one of the speakers and essentially represent him at this rally, and he threw some really terrible jokes out there, both quality and I think just morally. One of which, and the one that got a lot of attention, was a joke where he, to paraphrase, was basically saying, like, things are getting very bad these days. Not a lot of people know this, but there's even a floating island of garbage out in the ocean right now. I think it's called Puerto Rico. That was his joke. And obviously not even a great joke, but really detestable when you think about the stage and the platform that he is on. This is a stage that is a event hosting one of the people who potentially could be the next president of the United States, right? This isn't a roast event. This isn't a comedy club. This is a stage that literally the podium has the name of one of the two major political candidates for this country. And this man is spewing all types of racist remarks and claiming it is comedy, but still having a just, I don't know, it's just disgusting at the end of the day. And even going on to talk more about Latinos, he said, quote, "And these Latinos, they love making babies too. Just know that. They do. There's no pulling out. They don't do that. They come inside just like they come in our country." And again, and I'll get into, I'll just fucking address it now. I was going to wait because I was going to do a little Ask a Gringo segment because I made a video about this where I talked about why this is so disgusting and why it's not just jokes. And I was going to read some of the comments because it's interesting to me, people's inability to see the flaw or the fault in this, right? But one of the things I address is, and you guys know I always talk about this, the idea that nuance matters, right? Where you deliver a joke like this matters. If you are in a comedy setting, you're in a comedy club, yeah, of course, I get it. The idea is to push buttons, make people uncomfortable. It's a comedy club. We kind of go there for that, and nobody is meant to take it that seriously, right? But in a event that is an event for the potential next president of the United States, it's a very different setting. And my point has sort of been proven for me as we've seen some of the responses, because now you have this viral video going around. Somebody made a video, and in the video, they're talking about this supposed landfill problem that Puerto Rico has, and they're showing video that is allegedly in Puerto Rico, where there's just this, mountains of garbage that they can't seem to get a hold of. And the response to that video, a lot of the MAGA crowd saying, A, you guys are getting mad, but it's true. Or B, we should actually be thankful that he brought up this joke because now President Trump can address this issue, right? Spinning it in all of these different ways. And not only spinning it, but genuinely believing the narrative, which was originally started as this joke, because they don't want to paint a negative picture of their hero, Donald Trump. They're going to spin it into some story of it being a positive, or that this man was just speaking the truth. And now that video that I'm referencing that has gone viral has been proven to be fake. It was AI generated. The video clips of these mountains of garbage were not actually from Puerto Rico. They were, I can't remember what other island they were from, but somewhere far away from Puerto Rico. And again, this showcases why this is so dangerous in that specific environment. Because in that environment, you have people that want to either A, figure out any way they can to defend the behavior of this person that they are obsessed with in Donald Trump, or B, you have people that are so gullible, they've drank so much of the Kool-Aid that they can't decipher fact from fiction. And either way, that's a dangerous scenario. And that's a scenario that is unique to a political rally as opposed to a comedy club. And that's why context matters. That's why venue matters, right? That's why I say this is a nuanced conversation. Yes, he's a comedian, but he's a comedian speaking at a political rally. Yes, he's a roast comedian, and this is what he does, right? Anybody who could do any quick Google search of his comedy clips, you've seen that he is somebody who spews this type of this language, racism, pushes people's buttons just for the sake of pushing buttons. This is what he does. And while that may be true, someone like him should not be at a rally for someone who is potentially the next president of the United States. And that's where the issue lies. And that's where Trump and his team have to take blame for, which obviously they haven't, right? They've gone back and said the Trump's campaign has said that the speech does not reflect Trump's views. Donald Trump himself has claimed he has no idea who this guy is, doesn't know who booked him, had no idea what he was going to be talking about. There are now conspiracy theories again, because people are obsessed with this man Donald Trump, that he was this comic was somebody that was planted by the Democrats to hurt Donald Trump. And they can say all they want, but the irony is there's no way this man wasn't vetted in some sort of way here. On top of that, he was reading from a fucking teleprompter, so somebody had to load his set into a teleprompter, saw those jokes there, and didn't think anything of it. And on top of all that, Tony, as a comedian, I said this in my social media post, Tony, as a comedian, he's trained to work in front of crowds, to create material that he thinks will get the best reaction out of a crowd, right? So the fact that he stepped up to that podium and brought these jokes for this crowd tells you everything you need to know about this crowd. He believed this was the right venue, the right audience where these jokes would go over well. And not for nothing, I think why this is also a bit touchy, if you will, because this is a narrative that we as Puerto Ricans have been fighting against and pushing against our entire lives. This is bigger than a joke said by a comedian. This is a continuation of the racism and just overall demeaning of the people of Puerto Rico on the island of Puerto Rico. There's been so many times throughout the course of my life that I've had to educate people from here in the States that Puerto Rico is a functioning and healthy island. Does it have its problems? Of course. So does the U.S. So does every other place around the world. But the idea in a lot of people's minds, and this is why a joke like this runs so much deeper, many people here in the States who don't bother to educate themselves already view the people of Puerto Rico as lesser than. They already view us as this place that, has basically the bare minimum. They think we're walking on dirt floors. We live on dirt floors, right? There are people who, literally don't understand the fact that people from Puerto Rico are U.S. citizens. They don't understand that they pay taxes. They don't understand that they pay into our federal taxes. They don't understand that they use the American dollar. Like all these different, ignorant thoughts, and there's levels to it. I'm not saying everybody's is rooted in racism, but it is rooted in a historical racism that we are lesser than. I mean, it's been said by, it's been written in legislature that we are an alien race. It literally was written that way. We are an alien race that couldn't possibly adhere to American customs and standards. And I apologize if I'm ad-libbing a bit of that towards the end, but that is the gist of what they thought about us in legal documents from the United States. So a joke like this runs far deeper than just the words that were presented in that time period. It hits upon a trauma and a narrative that has been pushed for decades upon decades about our group of people. And I think that is so much of what's missing around this conversation and around people who don't get it and want to write it off as just a joke. No, this is a continuation of the battle that many of us have had to push against by just living as Puerto Ricans here in the United States of America, right? I can tell you how many times people have said, oh, but you're one of the good ones, meaning collectively, Puerto Ricans are bad, but you just happen to be one of the good ones. It's this notion, this underlying racism that has been baked into our culture as the United States of America, this superiority that we have, this idea that whiteness is the standard and everything else is weird or odd or lesser than. That's something we've all been fighting against our entire lives, and a joke like this is just a continuation of those generations of trauma and fights that we have had to push back against, the entirety of our lives, from my livelihood to my parents to my grandparents. This is just a continuation of the narrative that our people are lesser than. That's why it's such a big deal, and that's why it strikes a particular nerve. And yeah, I think that's the best way that I can sort of summarize, I guess, the feelings and the emotions that come up as a result of all of this. And, then there obviously is going to be, since this is the topic of conversation, everybody's going to be asked about what is their take on it, right? And our buddy, good old Biden, Sleepy Joe, he was trying to help, right? And he hopped on a call with a progressive Latino group and was asked about this. And Biden said, quote, "The only garbage I see floating out there is his supporters. His demonization of Latinos is unconscionable and it's un-American." Now listen, anybody who believes or cosigns or subscribes to the idea that Latinos are rapists, or immigrants as a whole are rapists or criminals, that people of color are problems, anybody that continues to push those narratives and those agendas, I would say, are garbage individuals, for sure. On the flip side of this, as much as I love to see a little fire going on, it isn't very presidential to call a group of people garbage. And I go back and forth on this because there have been times where I'm like, we're playing old political games and these guys are just fucking roasting us. We have to fight back a bit, fight fire with fire. But I do think this was probably not the best time, or even the best phrasing. And granted, the man is like, he's on his way out in many ways. And he could have clarified by saying, the only garbage I see are the people who don't have issue with what was said or believe in what was said. And that might have saved him a little bit of the backlash. But I do think, personally, that I would like to see us take the high road on this one, because now you're allowing the conversation to get steered the other direction, where it's like, oh, everybody's just as bad as the other one. And that's just not the case. We know that, but they're going to make that argument. I also love the argument, and I saw this in a lot of my comments, was like, oh, you guys are so soft, you can't take a joke. Or you guys are so easily offended by words. Now Republicans are up in arms about being called garbage. It's just like, the hypocrisy is unreal. And then to add to all of it, Donald Trump, of course, to seize on this moment to take attention away from his hate rally, he went and got a garbage truck and then had his logo plastered on the side of it. And he was riding around with like a really cool safety vest, in the garbage truck and all that. And that was like his PR stunt to bring attention to what Biden had said and move it all away from the Puerto Rico comment. Again, and this shit is just exhausting at this point. I'm tired. Not only am I sick, literally, but I'm also just tired of having to have these conversations. It really does make me sad. This is the current state of our politics in the United States of America, but here we are, And the other thing that I'm gonna take a break in a second, but I'm like telling myself, all right, it's today's Thursday, elections are on Tuesday. Don't worry about it. It's a few days and this whole thing's over. But that's not the case. That's never the case. I thought that was going to be the case in 2020. It wasn't the case, because we're going to end up having, the elections on Tuesday. The results are probably going to end up getting dragged out like they did the last time, hopefully not for as long. And then there's going to be, drama surrounding it, I think, regardless of who wins, and the drama is going to look different, but there's still going to be more, continued division. And as we saw with January 6th, who knows what potentially could happen between, when the results are finally submitted and when, Congress is supposed to certify them, right? There's still potentially 2 months in between that process happening, that we have to deal with more and more drama that is just exhausting. It just is. There's no way around it. But anyway, we'll talk also about Kamala Harris's plan for Puerto Rico. We'll talk about Bad Bunny, his endorsement, if you will. But now we'll take a quick break and then we'll be right back. All right, we are back, and let's talk about Kamala Harris. Actually, and it was like, and somebody could correct me if I'm wrong. I was trying to get the timelines as it was happening. I don't know the exact time that she dropped this video clip on her socials. She dropped a video laying out her plan for Puerto Rico, and it was dropped the same day as the Trump rally, as that whole thing happened. I don't know if timing-wise she dropped that after that comment was made or before, but it was the same day. And there's been a conversation back and forth about the timing of Bad Bunny sharing that video. Bad Bunny ended up sharing her plan for Puerto Rico that same day as well, like after the clips had gone viral of Kill Tony saying those things about Puerto Rico. A lot of people saying that he was just doing it in response to the joke. I personally, if you're asking me, and I'm willing to be wrong on this, but my instinct on this is, because there's been a lot of conversation about, is Bad Bunny going to endorse Kamala Harris? The Latin vote is much needed. He's the biggest name in Latin music. There's a lot of Puerto Ricans in key states like Pennsylvania and Florida. So the conversation, was heavy of like, is he going to do an endorsement? My take, in my like own general opinion, with no inside information whatsoever, knowing how calculated he usually is, I think behind closed doors, a conversation was had. If Kamala Harris can come up with a comprehensive plan for Puerto Rico, he would be willing to share it on his social media. That's why I don't know the timeline, and I wish I did. As far as when the joke was made versus when she put up the video. But that's what I personally believe that the plan all along was for her to put up this video. Bad Bunny would share it, and this was a way for, Puerto Ricans to be seen and heard, and that was sort of the conditions that Bad Bunny had as a means of like endorsing her, if you will. And that was to be as far as he would go with endorsing her. Like, he wouldn't be at a rally or come out and say it officially, but he would share it, and that would be like a given, like, oh, Bad Bunny is endorsing Kamala Harris. That's my thoughts. It could have been a coincidence, because I know a lot of other celebrities began sharing the video, but they could have also done that just to follow suit from Bad Bunny. So, not sure. But I did want to actually get into Kamala Harris's plan a little bit as far as Puerto Rico goes. I'll include a link in the show notes, as I always do, if you want to check it out. I'm gonna try to skip through it, but it's on her website. It's like 3 pages long for anybody who's really interested in diving into it. And I want to preface by saying, so Kamala Harris has put out her plan for Puerto Rico, and I know there's going to be a lot of backlash from Puerto Ricanos who feel like this is more either A, empty promises, or B, the fact that the United States is even making plans for Puerto Rico is a commentary on its colonial status. And I get the conversations in either direction. I think, generally speaking, to the first argument, all we could ever do is take politicians at face value, by their word, what they say. Yes, many make promises that they don't keep, but this is a part of the process, the democratic process. They run campaigns, they talk about their plans, but we don't know what they will or won't do until they actually go into office. So you can't allow yourself to just be cynical, because there have been many times where politicians did keep their promises, and there's been many times where they haven't. And I understand, as Puerto Ricans, it feels like more often than not we are forgotten, and I completely get that. But if your argument is that, oh, well, they always promise something, I ask you to not be so cynical and to be open to the idea that potentially this candidate could be different. That's all that I say. You have to be open to that idea, right? And I saw somebody bring this up on social media, and I thought it was a great point. Politicians they're there to serve the people. Not essentially, they are. They're there to serve the people. We put them in office, right? We give them their job. So part of that is to hold them accountable. And yeah, they may not be the perfect candidate, the one that checks every box that you have, but part of the democratic process is you pick the candidate that best suits your needs, right? There's no such thing as perfect, but the one that best suits your needs. And then throughout their candidacy, throughout their time at office, you do your best to hold them accountable and keep applying pressure and using your voice. And that's all we could do here. On the flip side of it, people who are just offended that there is even a plan that doesn't involve just immediate independence for Puerto Rico, I get it, but it's also just not realistic. And I get a lot of flack for this from people who are, in the independence movement. And again, for the record, I am pro-independence, but it is not something that's going to happen overnight, regardless of if you think it is, wrong that the U.S. is still, in control, so to speak, of Puerto Rico. I get that, but we can deal with the reality that we have in front of us, or we could just have blind rage and not get anything done and have these unrealistic expectations and requests that just don't actually make sense in real life. And I think that's where a lot of the issues lie in the independence movement, and the weakness of the independence movement is that I understand, listen, I understand this has been going on for a long time, but there has to be a level of patience and a real effort put forth on a plan of action, which I don't think we've tangibly had yet. Personally, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm open to it. To me, what I would like to see, and what I think what's being proposed here is, why not, for the time being, work with the U.S. government to help alleviate some of the issues that affect the people of Puerto Rico on a daily basis? Because I think we could do two things. You could work within the realm or the means that currently exist as a free associated state, as a territory of the United States. But you could also, in the long run, be trying to create a plan for independence. But in the short term, why not utilize what's available to us to help fix some of the issues that are plaguing the people of Puerto Rico? And that's why when I see a plan for Puerto Rico from a presidential candidate in Kamala Harris, I'm personally excited about it. Because in the short term, again, if we can begin to make some really big changes that help make drastic improvements to the island and the quality of life of the people, love to see it. And then from there, once we kind of have ourselves on more stable ground, then we can really make a concerted effort to get the United States to really address our status and give us our independence and from their colonial status, if you will. So that's how I see it. Now, on Kamala Harris's website, they talk about building an opportunity economy for Puerto Rico. Now, there are a few different things they talk about. They said Vice President Harris will mobilize the federal government to build an opportunity economy in Puerto Rico. They're going to launch a Puerto Rico Opportunity Economy Task Force. Vice President Harris will formalize a federal task force to lead a whole of government approach to create an opportunity economy across Puerto Rico. This task force will focus on rebuilding and revitalizing Puerto Rico's economic strength, restoring and modernizing the grid, investing in industries of the future, driving small business growth, strengthening the healthcare system, and lifting up the Puerto Rican people. It will also focus on strengthening the private sector, from supporting startups to small businesses to increasing capacity for larger businesses and building up industries such as biosciences, aerospace, electronics, manufacturing, clean energy, construction, and more. The task force will engage and coordinate efforts with stakeholders, including federal department agencies, businesses, nonprofits, local government officials, and Puerto Rican community leaders. It will be led by a senior presidential appointee to work closely with local counterparts to ensure that the federal government is most effectively leveraging its resources and expertise to support creating an opportunity economy in Puerto Rico. And there's a few different things in this thing. I mean, there's no way that I can get to all of it in the segment here. I did see people critiquing this a bit because they basically were like, okay, so now you're going to have U.S. imposed agency calling the shots on Puerto Rico. And I understand the fear just based upon, like, right now Puerto Rico has an oversight board that is appointed by the U.S. They're not actually people from Puerto Rico, local government. So it's kind of people who aren't a part of the local space making decisions that affect people in the local space. And here, Kamala said she would appoint someone to run that. Obviously, that seems like it would be somebody from the U.S. But I guess what makes me hopeful in this scenario is there was a point to say we want to work with local government. We want to work with small businesses, meaning ones on the island, which are locally owned. We want to work with nonprofits, which are generally going to be, local nonprofits, and as well as community leaders from Puerto Rico. So to me, that tells a different story where, listen, yeah, it's a federal government program. So of course the person heading it will be a representative of the U.S. federal government. But the idea is to work hand in hand with those who are boots on the ground in Puerto Rico on a daily basis. And to me, that is all you could really ask for, if you will. I mean, at the end of the day, if it's federal funding, federal time and energy being put into it, I don't think it's crazy that it would be led by somebody from the federal government. I think, again, you kind of have to pick and choose your battles here. And I'm going to just kind of go through quickly here, but they talk about addressing the energy grid, cutting some of the red tape to get projects moving, which is something they need, expanding access to clean energy, all kinds of tax benefits for those to switch over to cleaner, like solar appliances and things like that. Man, there's a lot of things to address that. One of the things I've talked about a lot, putting disaster relief funds to work, right? There is money allocated for Puerto Rico, federal money from FEMA and things of that nature. There have been a lot of issues in getting those projects off the ground and getting the money distributed. So her obviously recognizing that, which I think is great. And they're talking about access to housing that is affordable for local Puerto Rican families. I think that's amazing. They're talking about investing in the working and middle-class families of Puerto Rico, bringing a child tax credit for those in Puerto Rico, investing in building up Puerto Rico's next generation of doctors, teachers, and more, including to address the shortage of healthcare providers, building up the workforce for the future, equal access to federal support, which is a big one, advanced healthcare service delivery in Puerto Rico, enhancing Puerto Rico's competitiveness in industries of the future, including biosciences and manufacturing, and funding programs like small business boot camps, business mentoring, and navigators, and supporting community colleges to give Puerto Rico the tools to start a business and take a more managerial job, speaking about the people of Puerto Rico. So, listen, again, I'll include the link to the show notes. I can barely speak right now, so I can't even dive into this deeper than I would normally. And by the way, there's literally that's 2 pages of it. She even goes on to talk about making Puerto Rico a hub for cargo transit, improving the aerospace industry, investing in Puerto Rican artists and creators, talking about engaging in the U.S. Copyright Office to provide support and training for creators to how to protect their creations, and partner with Puerto Rican educational institutions to expand training and career pathways for artists and creators, enhancing lending to Puerto Rican entrepreneurs to start and grow small businesses. Vice President Harris's plan will provide loans that are fully forgivable of up to $20,000 to Puerto Rican entrepreneurs and others who have historically faced barriers to starting new businesses or growing existing businesses, in partnership with community banks and other trusted organizations. So, all amazing things. And again, I understand skepticism, politicians, dream selling season, all that stuff. But at least somebody's divulging a real plan and things that legitimately will better the everyday person in Puerto Rico. And I think that's the beautiful thing about this. Again, I'll include a link to it in the show notes if you want to dive deeper. I'm getting to a point where I can barely fucking speak right now. So we'll end it there in this conversation. But I'm impressed. I'm proud of that. Whatever. I know I'm going to get backlash for saying that, but I think that this is a step in the right direction, and implementing these things in the short term will set us up to have a better opportunity, I think, when we move towards independence, to have a real shot at not only sustaining but prospering, being a prosperous independent nation. And that's what my overarching goal always is for Puerto Rico. So that's that. We'll touch on some positive stuff in our Mi Gente segment real quick. Mi Gente. All right, nothing specific here. I just wanted to acknowledge, I talk often about how Latinos, we have all these different interests and different priorities, and how oftentimes we're not, I think, engaging as powerfully as we could be if we just sort of came together a little bit more. And I was really proud to see, and not only just Latinos, but I think people in general who may not have been Puerto Rican, and obviously the Puerto Ricans are going to have their voice heard here, but those who aren't from our community who were reacting to this and calling out just how disgusting that joke was made by that comedian in the context of that rally. And I really do have to just applaud that. I think it is a beautiful thing when people can come together and have empathy for those who maybe they don't share exact background with, but understand how hurtful that would be if it was said about, their people, their country, whatever it might be. And I think in general, obviously the comments were made about Latinos as well, but I just like to see the outpouring of love. Even on my own personal social media, people that I know in real life that aren't Puerto Rican but have enjoyed time on the island, I saw them making videos, sort of, a lot of people were like putting in quotes, floating island of garbage, and then showcasing like their beautiful time they had in Puerto Rico. And I thought that was really beautiful as well. Again, like those who are just vacationers of Puerto Rico and have enjoyed their time coming to the defense of the island and calling this disgusting comment out for what it was. I found that to be really touching and really beautiful. And, I'm big on people using their platforms, and I have to give credit where credit is due. I loved seeing people sharing, coming and being very vocal, from the John Leguizamos of the world to people sharing Vice President Harris's plan for Puerto Rico. You had J-Lo and you've had Mark Anthony coming out and talking about things. I mean, even Nicky Jam, who endorsed Trump, has now taken back his endorsement of Trump. Obviously, Bad Bunny we spoke about. I saw Charlamagne the God give Tony Hinchcliffe a Donkey of the Day for this joke, and I think that's just a beautiful rallying moment where we can all come together and recognize the fact that, like, even if it isn't your own people per se that are being spoken about, we can all recognize and say and take a stand and say, like, hate and racism are not going to be things that we just idly stand by and ignore, and they don't represent us as a country here. And I think that was a beautiful unifying moment that came out of all of this that I really loved. So I just wanted to celebrate that a bit in our Mi Gente segment. I'm going to do a quick Ask a Gringo because I just thought there were some interesting comments and responses. So we'll touch on that real quick.
Ask a Gringo.
I have a question.
Y'all, I am dying. I apologize if this sounds awful. I'm so sorry. I feel awful while saying it, but we're fighting through this together. And of course, I'm like dead sick on Halloween. Not that I probably would have gone out tonight, because I have to work the entire weekend. But I'm playing it cool. I'm staying in because I need to work the entire weekend and I don't want to be dead. Anyway, so I had made this post, and I'd actually got people DMing me on Instagram who were like, I can't believe some of the comments that I'm reading on your post. I had some friends from Puerto Rico, and I had to be like, yeah, I mean, I think you don't realize by not living here in the States, there's a lot of racism. There are a lot of people that really look at brown people as lesser than. And also, as I kind of touched on earlier, don't understand the trauma and really dark history and suffering that the people of Puerto Rico have gone through. I mean, you can read the book War Against All Puerto Ricans, and it touches on a lot of things. It's one of the saddest books I've ever read. And I mean, it touches on, radiation experiments done by the U.S. government, how the 1/3 of the female population in Puerto Rico in the 50s was sterilized while they were testing what eventually became birth control drugs, and how many of those women had no idea what they were signing up for. They were coaxed into signing up for these trials and didn't know that they were actually being sterilized. 1/3 of our population, and the longest surveillance in FBI history on U.S. citizens occurred in Puerto Rico. That they tested bombs on our islands of Vieques, and Vieques has the highest rates of cancer in all of Puerto Rico. It's this anomaly, and the U.S. government has never taken responsibility or acknowledged that there is potential that the reason why cancer is so prominent in that area of Puerto Rico, and if you hear me going back and forth between Puerto Rico and Puerto Rico, I'm trying to begin to just say it the right way as I try to get better at Spanish and things like that. I'm trying to say it the proper way, but the U.S. government has never acknowledged that there's a tie between the high rates of cancer on the island of Vieques, a tie between those cancer rates and the fact that they used to use the island of Vieques as a testing ground for U.S. bombs. So there's all types of things, all types of a dark history thrown in there that the Puerto Rican people have been traumatized by. I mean, shit, it was illegal to fly the Puerto Rican flag in the States for a long time. That's why the Puerto Rican Day Parade is such a big deal. Why Puerto Ricans are so crazy about flying flags, because at one point we legally couldn't fly them in the United States of America, right? So you have to think about all these things. So, and I'm not going to read anybody's name. I'm not going to give people clout. But it's interesting to me. And I believe this person is Puerto Rican as well. They said, he's a comedian. Stop being soft, family. And this is on a couple of things. I already touched on the idea of nuance, right? Where venue matters. Political rally, not a place for this. Comedy club, sure. You're paying to go there. You're going to see this. You're kind of expecting people to push boundaries and that kind of thing. But in a political rally for one of the major parties, there's no place for this type of speech, this type of conversation. B, the other thing that bothers me about these conversations is the part about being soft. And this is like the toxic alpha bro bullshit that has been pushed into our society, that God forbid you have an opinion, God forbid you call somebody out for being an asshole, essentially. Now you're soft. Now because you were offended by it. And again, it has nothing to do with being soft. I'm not running home crying about this stuff, right? It's calling out things for what they are. If somebody's being a bigot, if somebody is spewing hate, call it out, right? It's that bully mentality that's why so many of them are drawn to Donald Trump, because he exudes that. Because the rest of the world is progressing past that mentality where they're saying, no, the bully, dickhead, stereotypical jock that we used to put on a pedestal, we're actually realizing that's not that cool. That's an incredibly toxic way to be brought up. You're actually compensating for something. That's not a goal for any young man to try to achieve, to be this callous piece of shit that doesn't take others' feelings into account. That's actually a thing of the past, and we want to, erase that old mindset of that's what it is to be a man. And a lot of these people are holding on with everything they have because that's their entire identity. They're the tough guy. They're the fucking toxic, the stereotypical, definition of toxic masculinity, right? They are the people who love that he talks about grabbing women by their genitals, right? They're the one who loves that, while his wife was at home with their newborn baby, he was out, fucking a porn star that he paid for, right? They love that. They think that's badass. That makes him so damn cool, right? And that is the toxic mindset, the identity that these guys are holding on to of what it means to be a man, And God forbid you call people out for doing something bad that makes you soft, that makes you, this, that, and the third. And I think that is just that old mindset that has been a detriment to our society that we have been progressing past. But Trump and his people are holding on to that with everything they have. And last one, this person said, dude, Trump didn't say that. A comedian who frequently has that kind of content on his show said it. Not like Trump himself picked Tony. Okay. I feel like this goes without saying, but Trump didn't have to say it himself. His name is on the sign that's on the podium that this person is speaking from. His name is the event that brought those people there. He didn't have to book Tony himself. Someone from his campaign thought that this person, right? And as you said, everybody knows he does this kind of content, but somebody from Trump's campaign, if it wasn't Trump himself, but somebody from his campaign said, hey, we've seen this guy's work, and we think it would fit in perfectly with the messaging we're trying to put out there for this rally. Let's book him to do a set. That's the mindset. I refuse to believe that one of the people on Trump's team in charge of booking speakers for an event to be held at Madison Square Garden didn't do any vetting whatsoever and just blindly picked a random comedian and threw them up there. That's not how these things work. You know the type of vetting that happens to get in the same room as a president, let alone speak at their event? What are we talking about? That's not how these things work. Trump didn't have to say it himself because somebody on his team thought that this person's viewpoints and brand of comedy was in line with Trump and his audience. That's it. And I said this in the response to that person. As the old saying goes, you are the accumulation or the average of the people that you spend the most time with, or the people that you surround yourself with, right? In this case, the people that you choose to surround yourself with, they are a representation of who you are and what you believe. Doesn't mean you co-sign every single thing they do or say, but in some way, shape, or form, they represent a shared belief, a shared idea. So anybody speaking on that stage, they're actually brought up there because they have a shared idea that is in line with Trump and his audience. And they believed that those speakers would be a great fit to talk to his audience and represent Trump himself, essentially. So that's all you need to know. As you said yourself, this person has a history of doing these types of things, these kinds of jokes. Everybody knows that. You think the person who hired him didn't do a little bit of research? Yet, they still booked him and thought it would be a good idea, thought that he represented their values, and thought that he would be a great representative on behalf of Donald Trump to speak to his office. Enough said. Speak to his audience, sorry. Enough said. Yeah, and that's it. That's all I got for you on all that stuff. Let's tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment called Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion stew.
All right, y'all. I do not have it in me to do any more talk. I'm literally I'm fighting off coughing, sneezing. My chest is killing me right now. I think we got to the points. Election day's on Tuesday. If you haven't voted yet, get out there, vote early if you can, and let's just put an end to this nonsense once and for all. I'm tired. Tired of talking about it, tired of dealing with it. We all deserve so much better as a country, as just human beings in general. And I'm tired of this fucking circus and these terrible, disgusting people being platformed in the way that they are. So that's my conclusion, Stu. I'll catch you on Tuesday with a brand new episode. Till then, hope you are feeling far better than I am. I'm going to try and rest up and be back for the weekend. I'll talk to you on Tuesday. Have an amazing Halloween. Be safe out there. And yeah, we'll talk soon. Peace.